What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 2013 Audi S4. Today on the S4 behind me, we're going to be covering how to service the rear differential. This vehicle is equipped with a sport differential, so as you can see we have two different types of fluids here, as well as 4 fill and drain plugs. Now this process is going to be applicable to all S4s from 2010 to 2016, as well as your S5s from 2010 to 2017. Again, these are for sport diff models. However, the process for the vehicles without the sport diff is going to be very similar. We're using genuine fluid today, as well as genuine plugs. We have both of these parts available on fcpeuro.com. Now, before we get started on this, let's talk about how often you want to service the differential. Typically, the gear oil in your differential, if you want to be ahead of the curve, we recommend you do it every 50,000 miles. However, between 75 to 100K is also a good sweet spot. It really depends on how hard you drive the vehicle. Same goes for the electronic portion of the differential. Now that doesn't really engage as often as you would think. It's really only being used under heavy driving, track use, autocrossing. You get the idea. However, never hurts to service it along at the same time as the differential fluid. Now we know what we're working with. Let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. And now for tools. For this job, we're going to need a few basic tools, starting with, most importantly, a 5mm hex. You can use an Allen key or a hex bit socket like we have today. I'm going to be using that with a 1/4-inch ratchet. We're also going to need a torque wrench to torque up our plugs when we're done. And then I am using CTA. This is a drain and fill pump 7075 to help load the fluid into our differential. And then not pictured here, but always needed when you're doing a job like this, is some sort of catch pan. Today we're going to be working on the lift, so the car is going to be pretty even. However, if you're doing this at home, just make sure you have all 4 corners of the vehicle level so that your fluids get filled up properly in the casings. Now we know what tools we're working with. Let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. All right, under the S4, we're going to go ahead and start by doing the gear oil portion of the differential first. That is going to be the passenger side half of the casing. You're going to go ahead and see that we have a fill plug right up top here, and we have our drain plug located right below. An easy way to tell the difference is on the passenger side of the casing, you'll have an Audi logo stamped on the casing. On the electronic portion, you'll have an ATF logo stamped on the casing, so it's an easy way to tell. So we're going to go ahead and get started on the passenger side with the gear oil. We're going to grab our 5mm hex, and like any differential, transmission, gearbox, anything you're doing, you always want to crack the fill plug first before you drain the fluid, just so that you know that you can fill it up after you're done with the job. So let's grab our 5mm hex and we'll go ahead and crack that free. All right, we're going to go ahead and crack our fill plug free first. With these kind of plugs, you want to make sure that you have your hex bit seated in all the way. The last thing you want to do is strip one of these. Now that I know it's broken free, I'm just going to go ahead and remove it all the way. A little bit of fluid might come out, but that's okay. We have our catch pan ready to go. Removing the plug will also allow for the whole system to flow out a little bit easier. There's our old plug. These are always fun. They always get stuck on the hex bits, especially if they have a little bit of corrosion in them or debris from the road. Now with our fill plug removed, we can go ahead and remove our drain plug using the same 5mm hex. Get that seated in all the way. Now it's broken free. I'll just go ahead and remove it by hand. I'm putting constant pressure on this as I undo it, so that once I feel it disengage from the threads, I can just pull it off to the side, hopefully, and not bathe myself in gear oil. All right, we're gonna give that a little bit to drain. As it's draining, it doesn't hurt if you wanna put your car in neutral, just spin the wheels a little bit and really get the rest of that oil out of there. We're gonna come back to you in a few minutes. All right, now that we've given the differential some time to drain out its fluid, we're gonna go ahead and get ready to install our new drain plug. Just gonna wipe down the area a little bit with a fresh towel. You can come back afterwards and give it another clean. Just going to start the plug by hand. I have the 5mm socket already on the drain plug. Thread it in all the way. And now that it's fully seated by hand, we're going to go ahead and torque it down to 15 Newton meters or 11 foot-pounds. As you can see, it's not a whole lot. It doesn't really take a whole lot of torque to get that seated properly. Now with that all situated, I'm gonna go ahead and get my fluid transfer pump ready, and we'll go ahead and start filling the casing. You're gonna wanna fill until it starts to dribble out of the fill hole. Pretty standard procedure for most differentials, gearboxes, transmissions, all that good stuff. I got my syringe ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and feed it into the fill port. And we're just gonna start filling. Once we near almost running out of fluid and we've gone through almost a full liter, then we'll start to be a little bit more aware of how far we stick this syringe in so that we can allow the fluid to dribble out once it's actually full. And of course, we're gonna do this a couple more times, but there are bigger tools out there, different transfer pumps that you can use to do this DIY. However, for today, this one is gonna be our friend. At this point, I'm nearing the end of that liter bottle, so hopefully we should start seeing some dribblage very soon. At this point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna let that get down to a steady, we're gonna let that come down to a little drip. Once it becomes a baby drip, then we'll go ahead and install our fill plug. We'll torque it down to the same spec. Now that our fluid has come down to a baby dribble, we're gonna go ahead and install our fill plug by hand first, and then we'll go ahead and torque it down to 15 Newton meters or 11 foot-pounds. Now that we have it snugged up, I'm gonna go ahead and torque it down. At this point, if you want to clean up the area, I'm going to use a little bit of brake clean just to clean everything up, make sure it's not actually leaking down the road. Now we'll head over to the electronic side of the diff and do the same thing. All right, over on the driver's side of things, we're going to go ahead and tackle the electronic portion of our differential, service the fluid on that end. Easy way to remember, driver's side, the casing's also stamped ATF on the electronic side of things. So we have our fill plug up top here. We're gonna go ahead and crack that open and remove it with our same 5mm hex. And then we'll go ahead and drain. It's a little bit tight with the exhaust up here, but you can get it. All right, this one's putting up a little bit of a fight. It's probably filled with a little bit of grime and grit. We went ahead and hit it with some PB Blaster earlier to kind of flush it out a little bit. We were able to get the socket in some more now, so we're gonna go ahead and give it a try. But as always, try to have that socket seated in as best as possible so you don't strip anything out. All right, I was able to remove the plug by hand the rest of the way. Now we'll go ahead and remove the drain plug right down here using the same 5mm hex. We have our catch pan ready to go. All right, we'll give that same thing a couple minutes to drain, and then once it is fully done draining, we'll go ahead and start filling it up. Now that our fluid is done dripping, we're gonna go ahead and install our new drain plug. Always do this by hand, and of course, always make sure that the old crush washer came off. Should go without saying, but you never know. With that seated down, we're gonna go ahead and torque it down to 15 Newton meters or 11 foot-pounds. Now we can go ahead and start filling the system. Similar like we did on the other side, we're gonna use that same CTA syringe, and we'll load it up and we'll fill it up a couple times until it starts dribbling out of the fill hole. So let's get to it. Now, because this is such a tight squeeze over here, as you can see, I'm feeding my syringe through the exhaust so that I can have enough room to curve the fill tube here. It is not going in all the way on the fill hole as I would like, so you're seeing a little bit of fluid dribble out. That doesn't mean it's full, that just means that we're getting a little bit of spillage as I pressurize the system. So once it is actually full, it will continuously dribble out until it's reached max capacity. So just keep that in mind. It's not that we're overfilling it or full. We just don't have the best room in here for this job. Now it is actually full. It is actually coming out with a bit of a stream. So we're gonna go ahead and let that do its thing, just like we did on the other side. Once it comes down to a slow dribble, we'll go ahead and put in our new fill plug. Now that it's come down to a steady drip, we can go ahead and install our new fill plug. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a quick wipe, and then I'm gonna try to start it by hand first, and then we'll torque it down. All right, now we can go ahead and torque it down to 15 Newton meters or 11 foot-pounds. Now, one thing I will say from looking at this earlier, the space is a little tight. We may not be able to get a torque wrench up in there, so if that's the case, we'll just snug it down with the old calibrated wrist. Because it is a fill plug and it is up top, more than likely it's not gonna leak on you as long as you snug it down gently and obviously not over tighten it. But we'll give the torque wrench a shot first. And there you have it, my good people. You have fully serviced the rear differential on your S4 or S5. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave them in the comment box below. And if you like this video and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.